When 11-year-old Mercy Caldwell whispers those devastating words to stranger Ezra Kane in the harsh Nevada wilderness of 1867, she has no idea she's about to change both their lives forever. But as ruthless enemies close in on their makeshift family, will a hardened drifter and a throwaway child prove that blood isn't the only thing that makes a family worth dying for? A gunshot cracked through the morning air, sending ravens scattering from the wooden rooftops of Redemption Creek, Nevada territory. 10-year-old Mercy Caldwell pressed herself against the cold brick wall of Henderson's General Store, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. The October sun of 1867 painted everything gold, but hunger painted her world gray. She counted 3 heartbeats before peering around the corner. False alarm, just old Pete shooting at bottles behind the saloon again. Still, the sound reminded her that danger lived everywhere in this dusty mining town, especially for a girl with no name on any family Bible and no roof over her head. The smell of fresh bread drifted from inside the store, making her empty stomach twist with want. Mrs. Henderson was arranging loaves on wooden shelves, each one looking like heaven wrapped in brown crust. Mercy's bare feet shifted on the splintered boardwalk as she calculated her chances. Quick grab, faster run. Hope nobody cared enough to chase a skinny orphan girl. But someone was watching her. You planning to stand there all morning? Or you gonna steal that bread? Mercy spun around so fast she nearly fell. A tall man leaned against the alley wall, his weathered face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. His voice carried no anger, just curious interest, like he was asking about the weather. "I wasn't stealing nothing, mister," she whispered, though they both knew better. The stranger studied her with eyes the color of winter sky. Unlike other grown-ups in town, he didn't look at her like she was a pest to be swatted away. His clothes marked him as neither rich nor poor. Faded blue shirt, worn leather vest, boots that had walked many miles but weren't falling apart. "Name's Ezra Kane," he said, settling his long frame more comfortably against the wall. "And you look like you haven't eaten since last Tuesday." Mercy lifted her chin, practicing the defiance that had kept her alive for 3 years on these streets. "Don't need your pity. Good thing I ain't offering any." Ezra pulled a cloth bundle from his saddlebag. The smell of seasoned meat made Mercy's mouth water despite her caution. "Got more jerky here than one man ought to eat. Be ashamed to let it spoil." Every adult who'd ever offered her kindness wanted something back. Mercy had learned that lesson with bruises and worse. She forced herself to stay still, even as her stomach cramped with hunger. "What do you want from me?" The question came out smaller than she meant it to. Ezra considered this seriously, like she'd asked something important instead of obvious. "Maybe just some company while I eat breakfast. Gets mighty lonely traveling alone." A coyote howled somewhere in the hills beyond town, its voice echoing off the canyon walls. Mercy knew that sound, the call of something wild and hungry, searching for its pack. She looked at the stranger named Ezra Kane and wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only lonely creature in Redemption Creek. "I suppose I could sit for a minute," she said, trying to sound like she was doing him the favor. Ezra smiled, and something warm flickered in Mercy's chest, a feeling she'd almost forgotten existed. He unwrapped the jerky and offered her a piece without ceremony. Like sharing food with strange children was the most natural thing in the world. As she bit into the salty meat, Mercy studied Ezra's face. Lines around his eyes spoke of squinting into too many suns. A scar ran along his left hand, white against weathered skin. His gun sat easy in its holster, worn from use but not from showing off. "You ain't from around here," she observed between bites. "California, mostly. Been traveling since spring. Looking for a place that feels like home." Ezra tore off another piece of jerky. "What about you? Got people somewhere?" The question hit like a physical blow. Mercy swallowed hard, the meat suddenly tasting like dust. "Had people once. Don't anymore." They ate in comfortable silence while the town woke up around them. Miners trudged toward the claims with picks and shovels. The schoolmarm rang her bell, calling children who had homes and lunches and parents who cared if they learned their letters. "Sheriff says there's good land for sale up in the hills," Ezra mentioned casually. thinking I might settle down, try my hand at farming. Mercy's heart did something strange. A little skip that felt like hope trying to grow in barren ground. You staying in Redemption Creek? Maybe. Depends on whether the town's got room for one more dreamer. The church bell chimed 8 times, and Mrs. Henderson emerged from her store with a broom. Her sharp eyes found Mercy immediately, narrowing with disapproval. You shoo, girl. Ain't buying nothing. Then don't loiter where decent folks do business. Heat flooded Mercy's cheeks, but before she could slink away, Ezra stood up. His height made Mrs. Henderson take a step back. Morning, ma'am. Ezra Kane. He touched his hat politely. Miss Mercy here was just keeping me company while I had breakfast. Mighty nice of her to spare the time. Mrs. Henderson's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Nobody in Redemption Creek had ever called Mercy Miss anything. Certainly not with the respect Ezra put behind the word. Well, that is, she's just a... Mrs. Henderson stammered. She's just a what? Ezra's voice stayed polite, but something dangerous flickered beneath the surface. Mrs. Henderson clutched her broom tighter and retreated into her store without another word. Mercy stared up at Ezra in amazement. In 3 years of living on Redemption Creek streets, nobody had ever stood up for her. Why'd you do that? She asked. Do what? Make her treat me like I was somebody. Ezra knelt down until they were eye to eye. Far as I can tell, you are somebody. Question is, do you know it? Before Mercy could answer, he was standing again, shouldering his saddlebag. I'll be in town a few more days, getting supplies and such. Maybe I'll see you around. He walked away with the easy stride of a man comfortable in his own skin, leaving Mercy standing in the alley with her world tilted sideways. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and seen a person worth defending. She touched the spot on her dress where she kept her parents' photograph, the only proof she'd ever mattered to anyone. Maybe, just maybe, there was still room in the world for one more person to care. 3 days crawled by like wounded animals, each one longer than the last. Mercy watched from hidden corners as Ezra Kane moved through Redemption Creek like he belonged there, talking quietly with shopkeepers and examining mining claims at the assayer's office. Unlike other drifters who drank themselves stupid or started fights over card games, Ezra seemed to have a plan. She followed him at a distance, curious as a cat and twice as careful. He bought supplies at 3 different stores, rope and nails at Morrison's Hardware, flour and coffee at Henderson's, where Mrs. Henderson suddenly developed manners, and a new bridle at the leather shop. Each purchase told her something. He was staying, he was building something, he had money but spent it careful-like. On the 4th morning, she found him sitting by the creek that gave the town its name. The water ran clear and cold from the mountains, carrying the whisper of snow on distant peaks. Ezra was whittling a piece of pine wood, his knife moving in smooth, practiced strokes. You following me, girl? He asked without looking up from his work. Mercy's cheeks burned. Maybe. Fair enough. I've been wondering when you'd work up the courage to get closer than 50 feet. She stepped out from behind the cottonwood tree where she'd been hiding, drawn by curiosity stronger than caution. What you making? Horse for my nephew back in California. Kid's got a birthday coming up next month. Ezra held up the half-carved figure. Even unfinished, she could see the grace in its wooden limbs. His mama tells me he's got a whole collection of animals I've sent over the years. The casual mention of family made something twist in Mercy's chest. She sat down on a fallen log, close enough to see his work but far enough to run if needed. You got people waiting for you somewhere? Some. My brother Jack and his wife Rose, couple of old friends in Sacramento. Ezra's knife paused. They write letters asking when I'm coming home. Truth is, I ain't sure where home is anymore. How come you left? War changed things. Changed me. His voice carried weights she couldn't understand. Came back from fighting to find everything different. Couldn't seem to fit into the life I'd left behind. Mercy nodded like she understood, though she'd never had a life to fit back into. Sheriff Morrison says you're looking to buy the Henderson place up in the hills. Old man Henderson's widow wants to sell, move back east to her sister. It's good land, spring water, rich soil, enough timber to build whatever needs building. Ezra tested the horse's carved legs, making sure they were even. Question is, what are you gonna do? Can't live on table scraps and charity forever. The blunt words hit like a slap. Mercy's defenses rose automatically. I manage just fine on my own. I'm sure you do. But managing ain't the same as living, is it? She wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. Winter was coming to the Nevada mountains, and she'd barely survived the last one. The abandoned mine shaft where she'd been sleeping would be deadly cold once the snows came. The orphanage in Carson City had already turned her away twice. Too old, too much trouble, too many questions about why she lived like a wild thing. What if? Ezra's knife moved carefully around the horse's neck. What if I told you I could use help with that homestead? Someone to tend a garden, maybe help with cooking and such. Fair wages, warm place to sleep through winter. Mercy's heart started beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. You offering me work? I'm offering you a choice. Work hard, earn your keep, have a place to call home. Or keep doing what you're doing and hope for the best. A red-tailed hawk circled high above them, riding the morning thermals with lazy grace. Mercy envied its freedom, but realized for the first time that even hawks needed somewhere safe to roost. Why me? She asked. You don't know nothing about me. Could be I'm a thief or a liar or worse. Could be you are. Ezra's blue eyes met hers steadily. Could be I'm a murderer or a drunk or worse. We all got to start trusting somebody sometime. What if I mess everything up? What if I can't do the work right? Then we figure it out together. That's what families do. The word hit her like lightning. Family. She dreamed of it, ached for it, given up hope of ever having it again. Now this stranger was offering exactly what she'd stopped believing in. I don't know how to be family, she whispered. Neither do I, not anymore. But maybe we could learn together. Mercy looked at her reflection in the creek water. Tangled hair, dirt-smudged cheeks, dress held together with hope and stubbornness. She looked like exactly what she was. A throwaway child nobody wanted. But when she looked up at Ezra Kane, she saw something different in his eyes. Not pity or calculation or the cruel hunger some men wore when they looked at young girls. She saw possibility. The Henderson place is 15 miles from town, she said carefully. Pretty isolated. It is. No neighbors close by if something goes wrong. Nope. Just you and me, trying to make a go of it. That's about the size of it. Mercy stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt. The photograph in her pocket seemed to whisper encouragement. Maybe her parents, wherever they were, wanted her to take this chance. When do we leave? She asked. Ezra's smile could have lit up the whole valley. Soon as you're ready, Miss Mercy. Soon as you're ready. As they walked back toward town together, Mercy realized she'd just made the biggest decision of her young life. For better or worse, she was about to find out what it meant to have someone willing to call her family. Behind them, the creek sang its ancient song of water finding its way home, carrying dreams and hopes toward whatever waited downstream. The abandoned Henderson homestead stretched before them like a forgotten dream, 15 miles from civilization and twice as beautiful as Mercy had imagined. Ezra's wagon creaked to a stop beside a log cabin that seemed to grow right out of the pine-covered hillside, while a natural spring bubbled nearby with water so clear she could see smooth stones on the bottom. Sweet Mary and Joseph, Mercy breathed, forgetting to hide her amazement. Language, Ezra chuckled, but his eyes held the same wonder. Though I reckon the good Lord wouldn't mind that particular expression. The cabin sat in a valley sheltered by rolling hills, with cleared fields ready for planting and a small barn that needed some fixing but still stood strong. Wild roses climbed the porch posts, and apple trees heavy with late fruit dotted the yard like nature's own decorations. Old Henderson built this place with his own hands, Ezra said, jumping down from the wagon. Took him 3 years, but he made something that'll last 100 more. Mercy slid down more carefully, her bare feet touching grass instead of dusty streets for the first time in years. The silence felt strange after town noise. No shouting miners, no rattling wagons, no saloon piano. Just wind in the trees and water singing over rocks. Nearest neighbors the Crawfords, about 3 miles that way. Ezra pointed toward a distant ridge. Good people, according to Sheriff Morrison. They'll help if we need it, but mostly we'll be on our own. On their own. The words should have scared her, but instead they felt like freedom. No Mrs. Henderson to glare at her, no drunk miners to dodge, no constant watching for trouble. Just space to breathe and grow. Inside, the cabin surprised her again. 2 bedrooms, a main room with a stone fireplace big enough to roast a whole pig, and a kitchen with a real stove instead of just a fire pit. Sunlight streamed through glass windows, actual glass, not just oiled paper. "This one's yours," Ezra said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. Mrs. Henderson's daughter used it before she got married and moved to Denver. Mercy stepped inside, hardly believing. A real bed with a quilt, a chest of drawers, even a small mirror on the wall. She'd never had a room before, never had a place that belonged just to her. "I can sleep on the floor in the main room," she said quickly. "Don't want to take up space you might need. Space is meant to be used, not saved for someday." Ezra set her few belongings on the chest. Besides, a working ranch hand deserves proper quarters. Working ranch hand. She liked the sound of that better than orphan or stray or any of the other names people used for unwanted children. The first week tested them both in ways neither expected. Mercy had lived outdoors for years, but indoor life followed different rules. She jumped at normal house sounds. The stove settling, wind rattling windows, mice skittering in the walls. She hoarded food in hidden corners until Ezra gently explained that meals would come regular now. No need to save for tomorrow. Sleeping inside felt wrong at first. She'd grown used to watching the stars, listening for danger, being ready to run. The bedroom's safety seemed too good to be true, like a trap waiting to spring. For 3 nights, she slept on the floor beside the door, ready to bolt if needed. Ezra never pushed or lectured. He just lived his own life quietly, cooking breakfast at the same time each morning, leaving her portion on the table whether she came to eat or not. He talked to her like she had sense, asked her opinion about where to plant the garden, showed her how to read the weather signs in cloud patterns and wind direction. "You got a natural way with growing things," he observed one afternoon, watching her coax life from the small vegetable patch behind the cabin. Everything she touched seemed to flourish, beans climbing their poles, pumpkins spreading their vines, even the stubborn carrots pushing up green tops. "Mama used to garden," Mercy said without thinking, then froze. She never talked about her parents, never shared those precious memories with anyone. "What else did she teach you?" Ezra asked gently. "Reading, cooking, how to darn socks." The words came easier now. "Papa taught me to whistle like a meadowlark and how to find direction by the stars." Sounds like good people. They were. Mercy wiped dirt from her hands. "Fever took them both when I was 7. Been on my own since." "Well, you ain't on your own anymore." The simple statement wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. For the first time since her parents died, Mercy allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found her way home. But even in paradise, shadows could fall. On their 8th day at the homestead, Mercy woke to find fresh horse tracks around the cabin. Tracks that hadn't been there when they went to sleep. Someone had been watching them in the dark, close enough to count windows and test door latches. "Could be anybody," Ezra said, studying the prints. "Travelers looking for water, maybe Indians passing through." But his hand rested on his gun as he spoke, and Mercy noticed how his eyes kept scanning the tree line. Whatever those tracks meant, Ezra Kane was taking no chances with their safety. That night, she heard him moving around the cabin long after bedtime, checking locks and loading his rifle. The peaceful valley suddenly felt less safe, more isolated. 15 miles from help was a long way if trouble came calling. Storm clouds gathered over the mountains like an army preparing for battle, and with them came 3 riders who would change everything. Mercy spotted them first, tiny figures moving down the far ridge, their horses picking careful paths through the rocky terrain. "Ezra!" she called from the garden where she'd been picking the last tomatoes of the season. "Company coming." He emerged from the barn where he'd been fixing harness leather, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. The riders were closer now, close enough to see they weren't just passing through. They were headed straight for the homestead with the purposeful movement of men on a mission. "Get inside," Ezra said quietly. "Stay away from the windows." Mercy's stomach clenched with familiar fear. She'd learned to read danger in adult voices, and Ezra's carried warning bells loud as church chimes. She gathered the tomatoes quickly and slipped into the cabin, but pressed herself against the kitchen window where she could still see. The three men rode into the yard like they owned it. The leader was big and broad, with cold eyes and hands that looked like they'd done violence. The other two were younger, maybe his sons, with the same mien set to their mouths. "Afternoon," the big man called out, not bothering to dismount. "Marcus Wilde's the name. These are my boys, Jake and Pete. Ezra Kane. What can I do for you gentlemen? Heard you bought the Henderson place. Mighty fine property. It suits my needs." Marcus Wilde's smile had no warmth in it. "Course, buying and keeping ain't always the same thing. Lot of things can happen to a man way out here, far from help." From her hiding spot, Mercy watched Ezra's posture change. Still relaxed, still polite, but ready for trouble like a coiled spring. "That sounds almost like a threat, Mr. Wilde. Just an observation. Mining country can be dangerous. Cave-ins, claim jumpers, accidents." Wilde's eyes swept the homestead like he was cataloging everything worth taking. "Man needs friends to watch his back. I'll keep that in mind." "You do that." Wilde finally swung down from his horse, and his sons followed. "Mind if we water our horses? It's a long ride back to town." Ezra couldn't refuse without seeming unfriendly, but Mercy saw how his hand stayed near his gun. "Spring's over there. Help yourself." While the horses drank, the three men wandered the property with casual interest that felt anything but casual. Jake Wilde examined the barn door like he was planning to come back later. Pete counted the windows on the cabin and tested the porch steps. Marcus himself walked the fence line, studying the land with the eye of someone making plans. "Nice setup you got here, Kane," Marcus said when they regrouped. "Real nice. Shame about old Henderson. Dying so sudden-like. I heard it was lung fever." "Oh, it was. But fever ain't the only thing that can kill a man." Marcus mounted his horse again, his boys following suit. "You take care of yourself, Kane. And that little stray you picked up. Pretty young thing like that needs protecting." The casual mention of Mercy sent ice through her veins. These men knew about her, had been watching long enough to learn their business. That made them dangerous in ways that went beyond simple claim jumping. "I protect what's mine," Ezra said, and there was steel in his voice now. "Course you do. That's what any man would say." Wilde tipped his hat with mock politeness. "We'll be seeing you around, Kane. Sooner than you think." They rode away at an easy pace like men with all the time in the world. Mercy stayed hidden until they disappeared over the ridge, then crept outside where Ezra stood watching the empty horizon. "Who were they really?" she asked. "Trouble. The kind that don't give up easy." Ezra turned to look at her, and his face was grim. "Pack whatever you can't bear to lose, Mercy. We might need to leave here fast." "Leave? But we just got settled. Better to run than die." Those men didn't ride 15 miles just to water their horses. That night, Mercy lay awake listening to every sound outside her window. Wind in the trees became footsteps. An owl's call turned into a signal whistle. The peaceful valley that had felt like paradise now seemed like a trap with only one way out. Ezra didn't sleep either. She could hear him moving through the cabin, checking locks, positioning rifles within easy reach. He'd turned their home into a fortress, but they both knew fortresses only worked if help was coming. Out here, 15 miles from town and 3 miles from neighbors, they were truly on their own. Around midnight, she heard horses again, distant hoofbeats circling the property like wolves testing a den. The riders never came close enough to see, but their message was clear. "We're watching, we're waiting, and we'll be back." When morning finally came, Mercy found Ezra at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked defeated. "There's things about me you should know," he said without looking up. Things I probably should have told you before now. Mercy's heart clenched. Here it came, the truth that would explain why men like Marcus Wilde wanted them gone. The secret that would change everything between them. What kind of things? She asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Ezra raised his head, and his eyes held the weight of old sorrows. The kind that get people killed if they stay too close to me. I killed a man in Arizona territory 3 years ago, Ezra said, his words falling into the morning silence like stones into still water. Shot him dead in the main street of Tombstone, with half the town watching. Mercy's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Outside, birds sang their usual songs, but inside the cabin, the world had just shifted on its foundation. She set down the cup carefully, her mind racing to understand what this meant for both of them. Was it murder? She whispered. Law called it self-defense. Most folks agreed. Ezra's hands clenched and unclenched on the table. But the man I killed had friends, and they don't much care what the law said. The revelation explained so much, why Ezra had been drifting, why he'd chosen such an isolated place to settle, why men like Marcus Wilde might want him gone. But it raised new questions too, questions that made her stomach churn with worry. What did this man do to make you kill him? Ezra's eyes went distant, seeing something terrible from his past. His name was Clayton Briggs. He was hurting a girl, younger than you, maybe 8 years old. Her mama was dead, and Briggs was supposed to be taking care of her. The words hit Mercy like physical blows. She'd seen that kind of hurt in other children's eyes, the hollow look that came from betrayal by the very people who should protect them. You saved her. Tried to. Girl didn't make it through the winter. Fever took her, same as it takes lots of children who ain't been cared for proper. Ezra's voice cracked slightly. Sometimes I wonder if I killed Briggs for her sake or just because I was tired of seeing evil go unpunished. Does it matter? Evil's still dead either way. Ezra looked at her with something like surprise. You ain't scared of me now? Knowing what I'd done? Mercy considered this seriously. The man sitting across from her had gentle hands that carved toy horses and patient words that made her feel worthy. The man who'd stood up to Mrs. Henderson and offered her a home when nobody else would. Evil might have driven him to violence, but evil wasn't what lived in his heart. I killed somebody too, she said quietly. Now it was Ezra's turn to freeze. Mercy. Back in Redemption Creek. Man named Garrett who used to corner girls in alleys, do things that weren't right. Her voice stayed steady, though her hands shook slightly. I was 8. He grabbed me behind the hotel, started tearing at my dress. I pushed him hard as I could, and he fell down the stairs. Broke his neck. The confession hung between them like a bridge they could either cross together or let crumble. Mercy had never told anyone about that night, about the sick sound Garrett made when he hit the bottom step, about the way his eyes stared at nothing afterward. Sheriff rule it an accident? Nobody much cared what happened to Garrett. Even Sheriff Morrison said the world was better off without him. Mercy met Ezra's gaze steadily. I ain't sorry he's dead. Does that make me bad? Makes you a survivor. Same as me. They sat in silence for a moment. Two people bound by violence they'd never wanted but couldn't undo. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled its lonesome song. So what happens now? Mercy asked. If Briggs had friends looking for you, and they found you here, then we got bigger problems than Marcus Wilde wanting our land. Ezra stood up, pacing to the window. Wilde might just be a local bully, or he might be working with people who've been hunting me for 3 years. The possibility sent cold fingers down Mercy's spine. She'd thought they were dealing with claim jumpers and greedy neighbors. If Ezra's past had caught up with them, their troubles were just beginning. We could run, she said. Pack up tonight, head for California or Oregon territory. Could. But running means never stopping, never having a home, never building anything that lasts. Ezra turned back to her. I'm tired of running, Mercy. Tired of looking over my shoulder and sleeping with one eye open. Then what do? We find out exactly what we're dealing with. If it's just wild, maybe we can handle it. If it's Briggs' friends. He left the sentence hanging. That afternoon, Ezra rode to the Crawford place to talk with their neighbors. Mercy stayed behind, supposedly to tend the animals, but really because they both knew she'd be safer at the homestead than on the open trail. She spent the time cleaning rifles and checking ammunition, tasks that would have seemed impossible a month ago but now felt grimly necessary. When Ezra returned near sunset, his face was grave. Tom Crawford says Wild's been asking questions around the territory. Wants to know about any new settlers, especially ones with something to hide. And there's been strangers in the area. Men asking about someone matching my description, offering money for information. Ezra unsaddled his horse with mechanical efficiency. Could be coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidences anymore. They spent the evening planning, discussing escape routes and hiding places, arranging signals in case they got separated. It felt like preparing for war, which Mercy supposed it was a war between their right to live in peace and other people's desire for revenge or profit. Whatever happens, Ezra said as they banked the fire for the night, I want you to know something. These past weeks, having you here, building something together, it's been the closest thing to happiness I've felt since the war ended. For me too, Mercy admitted. First time I ever felt like I belonged somewhere. You do belong. No matter what comes next, remember that. You belong somewhere in this world, and anyone who tries to tell you different is a liar. That night, Mercy dreamed of running through endless forests while shadows gave chase. She woke before dawn to find Ezra already up, standing guard at the window with his rifle ready. In the gray pre-dawn light, she could see fresh horse tracks in the yard. Someone had been watching them sleep, close enough to count their heartbeats. The hunters had found them. Now the real test would begin. The barn was burning. Mercy woke to the smell of smoke and the wild neighing of terrified horses, orange light dancing against her bedroom walls like the devil's own lantern show. She rolled out of bed and hit the floor running, grabbing the rifle Ezra had taught her to use just days before. Ezra! She shouted. But he was already moving, yanking on boots and checking his pistol in one fluid motion. Stay low, stay inside, he ordered, then kicked open the front door and disappeared into the night. Through her window, Mercy watched their winter hay supply turn to ash and ember. Dark figures moved in the tree line, too far away to identify but close enough to prove this was no accident. Someone wanted to flush them out, force them into the open where rifles could find their targets. The horses screamed as flames reached toward them. Ezra's bay gelding, Star, had been a wedding gift from his brother. The old mare, Bella, had carried Mercy to her new home just weeks ago. Now both animals faced death by fire unless someone acted fast. Ezra was already working the barn door, fighting to get the animals free before the roof collapsed. But the flames were spreading faster than one man could handle, and the shooters in the trees were waiting for exactly this moment, when desperation would make him careless. Mercy made a choice that would have terrified her a month ago. She slipped out the back door and circled wide, using the garden shed and apple trees for cover. If someone was going to shoot at her family, they'd have to deal with return fire. The first shot came from a clump of pines 50 yards out. Mercy saw the muzzle flash and aimed for the spot, squeezing the trigger just like Ezra had taught her. Her bullet sparked off rocks, missing the shooter but making him duck for cover. That's for burning our barn, she yelled, surprised by the anger in her own voice. A second shooter revealed himself when he fired at Ezra. This one was closer, hidden behind a fallen log near the creek. Mercy worked the rifle bolt and sent another round his way, the recoil slamming against her shoulder hard enough to leave bruises. By now, Ezra had both horses free and was leading them to safety behind the cabin. The barn roof groaned and swayed, ready to collapse in a shower of sparks and burning timber. In the firelight, she could see 3 men moving through the trees like hunting wolves. Last warning, Kane, one of them shouted. Leave now or burn with your claim. Come and make me. Ezra's voice carried pure defiance. The night exploded with gunfire. Bullets whined past Mercy's hiding spot, chipping bark from the apple tree that sheltered her. She aimed carefully and fired again, this time rewarded with a curse and the sound of someone crashing through underbrush. But they were outnumbered, and the attackers had better positions. Worst of all, the burning barn was spreading sparks toward the cabin. If the house caught fire, they'd lose everything. Their home, their supplies, their dreams of a life together. "Mercy," Ezra called. "Fall back to the house." She ran in a crouch, zigzagging like a rabbit dodging hawks. A bullet kicked up dirt beside her feet. Then another sparked off the cabin's log walls. She dove through the front door just as Ezra slammed it behind her. "You hit?" he asked, checking her for wounds. "No, but I think I winged one of them." Her hands shook as she reloaded the rifle. "How many you count?" "For maybe 5. Professional shooters by the sound of their rifles." Ezra peered through a gap in the shutters. "This ain't Marcus Wilde's doing. He'd use local boys with shotguns, not marksmen with military weapons." The truth hit Mercy like a physical blow. "They're here for you. Briggs' friends." "Looks like." Ezra's face was grim but determined. "Question is, do we surrender and hope they just want me, or do we fight?" "We fight." The words came out before Mercy even thought about them. "This is our home. Nobody's taking it without a battle." Outside, someone was shouting orders, coordinating an assault on the cabin. The barn had collapsed into a pile of glowing coals, but the light still showed men moving closer, using boulders and trees for cover. They were tightening the noose, preparing for a final rush. "There's something else you need to know," Ezra said, checking his ammunition. "Back in Tombstone, before I killed Briggs, he told me something. Said he wasn't working alone, that there were others like him, men who hurt children for profit." Mercy's blood ran cold. "You think they're all connected?" "I think I stumbled into something bigger than one evil man. And I think they want me dead not just for revenge, but to keep me quiet about what I learned." The pieces clicked together in Mercy's mind like a puzzle forming its ugly picture. Marcus Wilde's interest in their property, his crude comments about pretty young girls, the way his sons had looked at her with hungry eyes. "Wilde's one of them," she whispered. "That's my guess. And if we're right, then this isn't just about my past anymore. It's about protecting every child in the territory from monsters who think they can buy and sell innocence." A new sound reached them, hoofbeats approaching fast from the direction of town. Either help was coming or more enemies. In the firelight, Mercy couldn't tell which. "Whatever happens next," Ezra said, "I want you to know I'm proud of you. Prouder than any father could be of his daughter." Before Mercy could respond, the night erupted in fresh gunfire. But this time, some of the shots were aimed at their attackers, not at them. Someone else had joined the fight. The cavalry had arrived, but whether they were friends or foes remained to be seen. Sheriff Morrison's voice cut through the gunfire like a church bell calling sinners to judgment. "This is the law. Throw down your weapons and surrender." From the cabin window, Mercy watched 4 riders spread out in the firelight, their badges glinting like stars against the smoke-filled darkness. The sheriff had brought deputies, real lawmen with authority to arrest or shoot as needed. For the first time since the attack began, hope flickered in her chest. The shooting stopped abruptly, replaced by shouts and confusion among their attackers. Men who'd been brave enough to burn barns and terrorize families suddenly seemed less eager to face armed representatives of territorial justice. "Crawford," Sheriff Morrison called. "That you out there?" "Right here, Sheriff." Tom Crawford's voice came from the trees where he'd positioned himself to help. "Got 4 shooters pinned down, maybe more." So their neighbor had seen the fire and ridden for help. Mercy felt a surge of gratitude for people willing to risk their lives for newcomers they barely knew. Maybe community meant more than just living close together. Maybe it meant protecting each other when darkness came calling. "Kane, you and the girl all right in there?" "We're fine," Ezra shouted back. "But we got wounded attackers who might need tending." It was a lie designed to smoke out their enemies. If any of the shooters had been hit, they'd need to show themselves to get medical help. Sure enough, one man limped from behind a boulder, hands raised in surrender. "Don't shoot," he called. "I'm hit bad. Need a doctor." Deputy Willis moved forward carefully, keeping his rifle trained on the wounded man. In the firelight, Mercy could see blood soaking through the shooter's pants leg where her bullet had found its mark. She felt no satisfaction in wounding another person, but she didn't feel guilty either. The man had tried to burn them out of their home. "Name's Carson," the wounded man gasped as Willis tied his hands. "Work for Mr. Briggs down in Arizona." Ezra stiffened beside her. "Briggs is dead. I killed him 3 years ago." "Not that Briggs. His brother Samuel. He's been looking for you ever since Clayton got shot." The revelation hit like lightning. Ezra hadn't just killed one evil man. He'd made an enemy of an entire family. People with money and influence and the patience to hunt for years. No wonder professional killers had tracked him to this remote valley. "Samuel Briggs sent you to kill me?" Ezra called through the window. "Not kill. Capture." Carson's voice was getting weaker from blood loss. "He wants to handle you personal-like. Make you pay slow for what you done to his brother." Sheriff Morrison stepped closer to the cabin. "Kane, you want to tell me what this is about?" "Long story, Sheriff. But these men attacked my property and tried to murder my family. Whatever else happened, that's attempted murder and arson." "Fair enough. We'll sort the details later." Morrison turned back to the trees. "Rest of you men, come out peaceful or we'll smoke you out the hard way." 2 more attackers emerged from hiding, hands raised but faces sullen with defeat. The 4th man was nowhere to be seen, either dead, wounded too badly to move, or smart enough to slip away in the darkness. As the deputies secured their prisoners, Mercy finally felt safe enough to leave the cabin. The barn was a total loss, just glowing coals and twisted metal where their winter shelter had stood. But the horses were safe, the cabin was undamaged, and nobody had died. Considering how the night started, that counted as victory. "You did good shooting, Miss Mercy," Sheriff Morrison said, examining the scene. "Took real courage to face armed men in the dark." "Couldn't let them hurt my family," she said simply. The word slipped out without thinking, but it felt right. Family. Not the family she'd been born into, but the one she'd chosen and been chosen by. Blood didn't make people kin, love and loyalty did that. Tom Crawford rode up with his oldest son, both men armed and ready for whatever came next. "Saw the fire from our place," he explained. "Figured you might need help." "Much obliged," Ezra said, shaking Crawford's hand. "Don't know what would have happened without you riding for the sheriff. Neighbors look out for neighbors. That's how it works out here." As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky pink and gold, the full extent of their situation became clear. The attack had been planned and coordinated, not some random act of violence. Samuel Briggs had resources and determination, which meant this wouldn't be the last attempt on Ezra's life. "What happens now?" Mercy asked Sheriff Morrison as he prepared to leave with his prisoners. "Now we see what these men know about other crimes in the territory. If this Briggs fellow is running some kind of criminal operation, we need to shut it down before more families get hurt." Carson, the wounded shooter, was talking freely now that capture seemed preferable to bleeding to death in the wilderness. "Briggs owns judges and politicians all through Arizona and New Mexico. Got businesses in California too, real profitable ones." "What kind of businesses?" Morrison pressed. "The kind that deal in children. Young ones, pretty ones, easy to control." Carson's words made Mercy's stomach turn. "Clayton was scouting new territory when your friend killed him. Samuel's been planning revenge ever since." So Ezra's suspicions had been correct. He'd stumbled into something much larger than one evil man abusing one helpless child. He'd uncovered a network of monsters who bought and sold innocence, and now they wanted him silenced permanently. "This changes everything," Sheriff Morrison said grimly. "If Briggs is trafficking children, this becomes a federal matter. I'll need to contact the territorial marshal, maybe even Washington." As the lawmen rode away with their prisoners, Mercy and Ezra stood amid the ruins of their barn, watching smoke drift across the peaceful valley. Their sanctuary had been violated, their safety shattered, but something else had been born in the ashes, determination to see justice done. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Ezra asked. That we can't just hide here and hope they leave us alone? That's about the size of it. Samuel Briggs won't stop until I'm dead or he's stopped. And if he's really trafficking children, then we have to stop him, Mercy finished. Not just for us, but for all the children he's hurt and plans to hurt. It was a terrifying prospect, taking on a criminal network with resources and political connections. But it was also the right thing to do, and Mercy had learned that doing right mattered more than being safe. Their quiet life as homesteaders was over. Now they were soldiers in a war most people didn't even know existed. 3 weeks later, Mercy sat in the witness chair of the territorial courthouse in Carson City, facing a room packed with lawyers, reporters, and curious citizens. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the Bible to swear her oath, but her voice stayed steady when she promised to tell the truth. "State your name for the record, child," said Judge Harrison, a kindly man with silver whiskers who'd made sure she felt comfortable before the hearing began. "Mercy Caldwell Kane," she said, surprised by how natural the new name sounded. Ezra had legally adopted her the week before, making their family bond official in the eyes of the law. "And you live with Ezra Kane on his homestead in Redemption Valley?" "Yes, sir. He's my papa now." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Some of the spectators looked sympathetic, others merely curious about the orphan girl who'd helped capture dangerous criminals. But Mercy's attention focused on the man sitting with his lawyers at the defendant's table. Samuel Briggs was nothing like his dead brother Clayton. Where Clayton had been crude and violent, Samuel appeared refined and educated. His expensive suit and careful manners made him look like a successful businessman, not a criminal who destroyed children's lives for profit. But his eyes gave him away. When he looked at Mercy, she saw the same cold calculation that Clayton had shown before Ezra killed him. Samuel Briggs saw her as an obstacle to be removed, nothing more. "Tell the court about the night of November 15th, the prosecutor said. "What happened at your home?" Mercy took a deep breath and began to tell her story. She described the barn burning, the gunfight, the wounded attacker who'd confessed to working for Samuel Briggs. Her voice stayed calm and clear, just as Sheriff Morrison had coached her. "Did you fire a weapon during this attack?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, sir. I shot at the men who were trying to kill my family." "And did you hit anyone?" "One man. In the leg. I didn't want to kill him, just make him stop shooting at us." More murmurs from the spectators. The idea of an 11-year-old girl defending her home with rifle fire captured everyone's imagination, but Mercy wished they'd focus on the real crime, what Samuel Briggs had done to innocent children. "Objection!" Briggs' lead attorney jumped to his feet. "This testimony about an alleged attack has no bearing on the charges against my client." "Your Honor," the prosecutor responded, "this attack was directly connected to Mr. Briggs' criminal enterprise. The witness can establish the connection." "I'll allow it. Continue, young lady." Mercy went on to describe what the wounded attacker had told them about Samuel Briggs' businesses. Even speaking the words made her feel dirty, but someone had to tell the truth about monsters who hid behind respectability. When cross-examination began, Briggs' lawyer tried to paint her as a wild child who'd made up stories to protect her guardian. He suggested that Ezra had coached her testimony, that she was too young to understand what she'd really seen and heard. "Isn't it true, Miss Kane," the lawyer said with obvious skepticism about her new name, "that you've been living on the streets like a wild animal? That you have no education, no understanding of how civilized people behave?" Mercy felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she remembered Ezra's advice. "Stay calm, tell the truth, don't let them make you angry." "I know the difference between right and wrong," she said quietly. "I know what it feels like when grown-ups hurt children. And I know what those men said about Mr. Briggs' business. But you admit you've stolen food, lived like a vagrant, associated with criminals and undesirable elements? I did what I had to do to survive. That doesn't make me a liar." The lawyer pressed harder, trying to break her composure. "Isn't it convenient that a known killer like Ezra Kane found a damaged child willing to say whatever he wanted? How much did he pay you to lie in court?" "That did it." Mercy stood up in the witness chair, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. Ezra Kane is the best man I ever met. He saved me when nobody else cared if I lived or died. He gave me a home and a family and treated me like I mattered. You can say whatever you want about me, but don't you dare lie about him." Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "Sit down, young lady. But I'll remind counsel to treat this witness with appropriate respect." When Mercy finally stepped down from the witness stand, she felt drained but proud. She told the truth about Samuel Briggs, about the attack on their home, about the criminal network that destroyed children's lives. Whether the jury believed her remained to be seen. Ezra waited in the hallway outside the courtroom, his face anxious until he saw her approaching. "How'd it go?" "I told them everything. About the attack, about what Carson said, about why those men came after us." Mercy leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. "Think they believed me? Anybody with half a brain could see you were telling the truth. You did good, daughter. Real good." The words still sent warmth through her chest. Daughter. She had a papa who was proud of her, who'd stood by her through everything. No matter what happened with the trial, she'd already won the most important victory of her life. "What happens next?" she asked. "Next, we let justice take its course. And if justice fails..." Ezra's jaw tightened. "Then we find another way to stop Samuel Briggs." Through the courthouse windows, Mercy could see storm clouds gathering over the mountains. Winter was coming to Nevada territory, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the cold. She had family now, people willing to fight for her and with her. Whatever storms lay ahead, they'd weather them together. The jury foreman stood with shaking hands, a piece of paper that would decide Samuel Briggs' fate clutched between his weathered fingers. Judge Harrison's courtroom had never been so quiet. Even the winter wind outside seemed to hold its breath while justice prepared to speak. On the charge of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, we find the defendant. The foreman's voice cracked with the weight of his words. Not guilty. Mercy felt the world tilt sideways. Around her, the courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs and angry shouts. Samuel Briggs smiled coldly from the defendant's table, while his expensive lawyers shook hands like they'd just won the lottery. How could 12 men look at all the evidence and decide this monster was innocent? On the charge of operating a criminal enterprise, the foreman continued, his face pale with what looked like shame, we find the defendant not guilty. This is wrong, someone shouted from the gallery. Sheriff Morrison's jaw clenched so tight Mercy thought it might break, while the prosecutor stared at his notes like the words might rearrange themselves into a different verdict. But the worst part was watching Ezra's face crumble as he realized the system had failed them completely. 3 weeks of testimony, dozens of witnesses, mountains of evidence, all meaningless because Samuel Briggs had money and influence while they had only truth. Judge Harrison banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order to his courtroom. The defendant is free to go. This court is adjourned. As the crowd began to disperse, Samuel Briggs approached their bench with the confidence of a man who'd never doubted his victory. His lawyers flanked him like bodyguards, but Mercy could see the real threat in his cold eyes. "Mr. Kane," Briggs said with mock politeness, "I hope there are no hard feelings about this misunderstanding. Sometimes good people get caught up in situations they don't fully understand." "I understand plenty," Ezra replied, his voice deadly quiet. "I understand that money can buy anything, including justice." Now, that's a very serious accusation." Briggs' smile never wavered. "I'm just a businessman trying to make an honest living. If certain people would stop spreading malicious lies about my operations like buying and selling children?" Mercy couldn't keep the words inside any longer. Briggs looked down at her with the same expression someone might use when stepping around a dead animal. "Children should be seen and not heard, little girl. Especially children with questionable backgrounds." The threat was clear enough that Sheriff Morrison stepped between them. "That's enough, Briggs. You're free to go, but I suggest you do it quickly." "Of course, Sheriff. But before I leave Carson City, I thought I might look into purchasing some property in the area. I hear there's excellent land available in Redemption Valley." Ezra's hand moved toward his gun, but Morrison caught his wrist. Don't give him what he wants, Kane. He's trying to provoke you into doing something stupid. Briggs chuckled and tipped his hat. Pleasure doing business with you gentlemen. Miss Kane, I'm sure we'll meet again soon. After he left with his lawyers, the courthouse felt like a tomb. All their hopes for justice had died in that jury box, killed by corruption and cowardice. Mercy wanted to scream, to break something, to make the world hurt as much as her heart did. What do we do now? She asked. Now we go home, Ezra said heavily. And we prepare for what's coming next. The ride back to Redemption Valley took 2 days through snow-covered mountains that seemed to reflect their dark mood. They stopped overnight at the Crawford place, where Tom and his wife Mary offered warm food and warmer sympathy. Whole thing's a disgrace, Tom said over dinner. Every honest person in the territory knows Briggs is guilty as sin. Knowing and proving are different things, Mary added sadly. Money talks louder than truth in too many courtrooms. Their teenage daughter, Susan, helped Mercy care for the horses while the adults talked strategy. Susan was 15, pretty in the way that drew men's attention, and she listened carefully when Mercy described Samuel Briggs and his criminal network. There's been strange men asking questions around the territory, Susan said quietly. Papa didn't want to worry you during the trial, but we've had visitors. Men claiming to be looking for work, but really asking about young girls and their families. A chill ran down Mercy's spine that had nothing to do with winter cold. What kind of questions? Which families had daughters, how old they were, whether their fathers could protect them. Susan's voice dropped to a whisper. One man offered Papa money for information about suitable girls in need of opportunities. The network was already expanding, using Briggs' legal victory as permission to operate more boldly. How many families would suffer because 12 jurors had been too scared or too bought to convict an obvious criminal? That night, Mercy lay awake in the Crawfords' guest room, listening to wind howl around the cabin. Somewhere out there, Samuel Briggs was making plans to hurt more children. The law had failed to stop him, which meant someone else would have to try. When they finally reached home the next evening, their valley looked different somehow. The rebuilt barn stood solid against the snow, but shadows seemed deeper and more threatening. Even their own cabin felt less safe, like a fortress under siege. We can't stay here, Ezra said as they unpacked their supplies. Briggs will come after us again, and next time he won't send hired guns. He'll come himself. Running won't save those other children. Susan said men are already scouting families, looking for victims. And what are we supposed to do about it? The law won't help us, and we can't fight an entire criminal network alone. Mercy walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful valley that had become their sanctuary. Everything they'd built together was here, their home, their dreams, their new life as a family. Leaving meant abandoning all of it to a monster who thought money made him untouchable. But staying meant certain death, because Samuel Briggs wouldn't make the same mistakes his hired killers had made. He'd come prepared for war, and 2 people couldn't win against an army. Maybe we don't have to fight alone, she said slowly. What do you mean? I mean, maybe there are other people like us, other families who've been hurt by Briggs and his network, other folks who want justice but don't know how to get it. Ezra joined her at the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. You're talking about vigilante justice, taking the law into our own hands. I'm talking about protecting innocent children when the law won't do it. Outside, snow began to fall, covering their valley in pristine white that would hide tracks and muffle sounds. Perfect weather for hunters stalking their prey, or for prey turning into hunters. It's dangerous, Ezra warned. If we go after Briggs directly, we become criminals ourselves. No going back from that kind of choice. Some choices are worth making, even if they cost us everything. Mercy pressed her hand against the cold glass, watching snowflakes dance in the lamplight. Somewhere out there, children were suffering because evil men thought they could buy and sell innocence. The law had failed those children, but that didn't mean they had no protectors. All right, Ezra said finally. If we're going to do this, we do it smart. Plan carefully, strike hard, and disappear before anyone knows what hit them. You mean it? We're really going after Samuel Briggs. We're going after all of them. The whole rotten network. Ezra's reflection smiled grimly. Time to show these monsters what happens when they threaten our family. 6 months later, Samuel Briggs' empire was crumbling like a house built on sand, and he still didn't understand how 2 people had brought him to ruin. Mercy crouched in the hayloft of an abandoned barn outside Phoenix, Arizona territory, watching through a crack in the boards as federal marshals arrested another of Briggs' associates. "That's the 12th one this month," she whispered to Ezra, who was counting the armed men surrounding the building below. "Good. Maybe now those children in Santa Fe can sleep without nightmares." Their war against Samuel Briggs had become something larger than revenge. It was a crusade to dismantle an entire network of child traffickers operating across 3 territories. What had started as a desperate attempt to protect themselves had grown into a mission that consumed their every waking moment. They'd learned to move like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing before anyone could retaliate. Sometimes they rescued children directly, spiriting them away to safety with church groups and honest lawmen. Other times they gathered evidence and left it where federal authorities would find it, always staying one step ahead of both criminals and the law. The key had been finding other victims, other families destroyed by Briggs' network. A rancher whose daughter had been kidnapped, a shopkeeper whose son had disappeared, a widow whose granddaughter had been sold to strangers. One by one, they'd built an underground army of people seeking justice that courtrooms wouldn't provide. "Movement on the north side," Ezra murmured, adjusting his spyglass. "Looks like our information was correct. They're keeping children in the cellar." Mercy's stomach clenched. Even after months of this work, seeing evidence of what these monsters did to innocents still made her physically sick. But anger was useful. It kept her focused when compassion might make her hesitate. "How many?" she asked. "Can't tell from here, but Marshal Williams has enough men to handle whatever they find." Marshal Williams was one of the few federal lawmen they trusted completely. His own nephew had been taken by traffickers 5 years earlier, giving him personal motivation to see justice done. He'd learned to work with their network of vigilantes, asking no questions about how evidence appeared or how rescues got planned. "There," Ezra pointed to a side door. "Children coming out now." Through the crack, Mercy watched small figures emerge into daylight, blinking and stumbling like people who'd been kept underground too long. Her heart broke seeing their hollow faces and fearful movements. These children had learned not to hope for rescue, had accepted that the world contained only pain and darkness. But they were wrong. The world also contained people willing to risk everything to protect the innocent, and today those protectors had won another victory. "How many more do you think there are?" Mercy asked as they watched the children being led to safety. "Too many, but fewer than there were 6 months ago." It was true. Their campaign had forced Briggs to close operations in Colorado and New Mexico, had resulted in dozens of arrests, and had rescued over 100 children. But the cost had been enormous. They'd become fugitives themselves, wanted by law enforcement who couldn't tell the difference between vigilantes and criminals. "Papa," Mercy said, using the word that still felt like a gift every time she spoke it. "Do you ever regret what we've become?" Ezra was quiet for a long moment, watching federal agents catalog evidence below. "I regret that the world made it necessary, but I don't regret protecting children who had no one else to protect them." A new sound reached them, horses approaching fast from the east. Mercy tensed, hand moving to her rifle, but Ezra was already identifying the riders. "It's Susan Crawford and her brothers." Right on time. The Crawford family had become their most reliable allies, using their ranch as a safe house for rescued children and their contacts throughout the territory to gather intelligence. Susan, now 16 and fierce as a wildcat, had proven especially valuable at infiltrating Briggs' network by pretending to be a naive farm girl seeking work in the city. "Signals up," Susan called softly from below. "Briggs himself is in Tucson, meeting with buyers from California. Big shipment planned for next week." This was it, the chance they'd been waiting for. Samuel Briggs had stayed hidden for months, directing operations through intermediaries, while federal authorities closed in on his network. But greed had finally drawn him into the open, presenting an opportunity too valuable to ignore. How many men with him? Ezra asked. 6 that we could count, plus whatever local help he's hired. Susan's voice carried the hard edge of someone who'd seen too much evil in her young life. The children are being held at a warehouse near the railroad depot. Mercy felt the familiar mixture of fear and determination that came before every rescue mission. This would be their most dangerous operation yet, attempting to capture the head of the network while freeing an unknown number of children from armed guards. We'll need help, she said. More than just our usual group. Already arranged. One of Susan's brothers called up. Marshal Williams is coordinating with local authorities. Tucson Sheriff's honest. And he's got deputies ready to move when we give the signal. And if Briggs tries to run, won't get far. We've got people watching every road out of town. As the federal operation below them concluded successfully, Mercy felt a familiar surge of hope mixed with dread. They were close to ending Samuel Briggs' reign of terror, but success would require risks that might cost them everything. Time to finish this, Ezra said, gathering their equipment. Time to make sure Samuel Briggs never hurts another child. Mercy nodded, checking her weapons one final time. Tomorrow would bring either victory or death, but either way, their war against the monsters would finally end. As they climbed down from the hayloft, she offered a silent prayer for the children still trapped in darkness, waiting for salvation that might or might not come. Whatever happened next, they'd know that someone had tried to save them. Sometimes that was all the hope anyone could offer in a world where evil wore respectable faces and justice came at the point of a gun.